Hey, I'm Andy Moore, sophomore at East High School.
Hi, I'm Henry Pays. Andrew and I will be your hosts on Mile High Discussions today. We are accompanied by two fellow East students.
My name is Olivia Petard.
And my name's Luke Howes.
And for our first question of the day, we are going to open up with how does one maintain relationships between friends, sports, hobbies, and grades?
Interesting. I'm going to let you take this one. For starters.
Well, as you know, I can't speak much for sports, but a really important thing, I think, is time management, because grades, hobbies, sports, school, they all take up a ton of your time, and you need a way to kind of chisel out a chunk for friends and family.
Does that mean you schedule your hobbies?
No. It's really more of an on-the-fly thing, especially if you're part of a club. Your hobbies will probably be fairly scheduled, like every Wednesday after school or something like that. But if it's just like an individual thing, like you play an instrument or something, then you have to really, in the course of your day, figure out when am I going to have time that I might not have thought I had this morning, and then take advantage of that.
I definitely struggle with that daily, especially in terms of getting time with my little sister, and it's especially challenging, especially looking down my last year with my family. So with her, that looks like me leaving school a little bit early, or maybe not going home and napping and kind of refueling for whatever I have in the rest of my afternoon, but going to pick up my sister from school, because that's really meaningful time that we have together to reconnect. In terms of scheduling things with my family and with hobbies, it is a kind of funny thing to schedule a hobby. So if anything, I try to incorporate family in that. So like my dad and I run together frequently, and that's something that we can bond over. But it really just depends on the person, and it depends on how flexible your activities are.
So I would ask, how do you prioritize what you do, how you spend your time in terms of your hobbies and then your grades, and place the most value on what's important to you?
I think, personally, how I prioritize, most important is things that require you to be there, as in like a job. If you don't show up, you don't have a job anymore. Or a club that's very exclusive, that if you don't go to all the meetings and you don't attend all the events, then you'll no longer be part of the club. So those have to be priority number one. And then after that, you have to set a hierarchy of what's most important to you. So, friends, family, schoolwork.
Yeah, I agree. I also think that it's an issue of kind of redefining what you mean by like grades. Like I think that there's a huge burden relieved from trying to make time for all of these different things when you're really reevaluating constantly and making sure that the things that you are delegating time to are things that you can't, that are sustainable, that like you're interested in, that you're passionate about, that it's not such a labor all of the time to be setting aside. Because I mean, we know of plenty of people where it's constantly them jamming their schedules filled with things that they're constantly feeling anxiety about and that they don't really like doing. I would say that one of those things would probably be community service, largely. I think that there's a huge misconception about whether or not kids actually are genuine about that. And I think that it's really constantly about reevaluating. And I think that you avoid a lot of the issues when you're making sure that your priorities that you're being honest about what your priorities are.
So given that people with this, crazy full schedule, like you say, reevaluate their time, do you think that they should start scheduling free time, for nothing, for whatever that they may want to fill that with at that moment in time?
I definitely think that's super important. Like I always schedule, even last year, I had an insanely packed schedule. There were days where I would wake up at 6 and I wouldn't get home till 11, and I'd be doing stuff in between. But whenever possible, it's good to schedule at least an hour of just, taking a nap, reading a book, going on a walk, sitting on a couch in front of a TV and not thinking, just so that you can kind of refuel for the rest of your day, when you can, of course.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. I go crazy without like alone time specifically. So I think that everybody like relaxing and kind of refueling like that looks different for a lot of people. Sometimes that's grabbing coffee with a friend, that's going out with friends, and sometimes it really just depends on where you get energy from, and especially when you're going from all these different activities that are incredibly demanding. I think that one thing that I always do to set aside, like, my like getting ready for bed routine is just like, it's my alone time. And I know that this is kind of nerdy, but I always play NPR when I'm winding
That
down
is.
from a long day. But it's the beginning of the day. Again, listen to NPR. It's not a plug. I just love it. And it's the end of the day. And these are just times when I just kind of get to be by myself. I get to kind of like center myself before a day or after one.
Yeah, something I figured out last year is driving time is a really good time for like quiet thinking, as long as you're not in absurd traffic and you don't have a especially bad case of road rage, which it happens to everyone.
I don't know.
But,
people could be relieving.
Yes. Well, it's not exactly quiet special time. But if you've got an hour-long round-trip drive every day, you can use that. Listen to music. Listen to NPR. Or just kind of try and almost meditate a little bit. I don't like the word, but
With the
think to
connotation.
yourself. Yeah.
All right. So, but then, how is like a balanced life defined by you? Is it setting apart this free time? Like, how do you define what a balanced life is, and like, what are the facets that you need?
And you can use yourselves as examples. How do you balance your lives?
I'm not an example of a balanced life. Last year, I had to quit my job at the end of the year just because I had almost a month straight where every week, Monday through Friday, I would wake up at about 6:30 and I would not get home until 9, 10, 11:30. So I don't know if I'm really qualified to speak to that.
I wouldn't say that last year for us specifically, we were part of a super rigorous and super demanding program that took up a lot of our time. I'm not sure that we would have been exemplars for a balanced life. I think that if anything, that probably reminded us that, like, of our priorities, of like, you know what, this is not sustainable. I could not do this for years and years and years and years. So I think that a balanced life changes depending on, again, reevaluation. But after that, I definitely decided that I needed to be way more oriented towards like what my friends needed and what my family needed, because I had definitely been demanding a lot of them. Because when you're stressed, you're not good to other people. Like you're not the best you can be in relationships. And so I think that after such a demanding time for myself, it really was a time to look around and think of like, what can I do now? Because I obviously, like, my presence took such a toll on everybody else in my life.
I think definitely having a balanced life is a solid matter of foresight, because if you are part of a really, really rigorous club activity, sport, or you have a job 7 days a week, then the chances are very good that you're not going to have a balanced life. So you need to plan ahead for that and be ready for to let something go if things start to break.
So what are ways that you seek balance now?
Personal time, just trying to decompress after school and basically just sitting on my couch.
So
the best way.
given that obviously you have more time within your schedule now, how much different is that than last year?
It's infinitely. It's so much better. Last year it was 2, maybe 3 days a week, school from 7 a.m. until
11 a.m. or 11 p.m.?
11 p.m. And then, the other 2 or 3 days a week, it was school and then work from 5 to, God knows when. So being able to go home is really nice this year.
But right now in your lives, you both are applying to colleges, and it's a very important time. So how are you living a balanced life when the pressure is even higher, arguably, than last year?
Let me think about that. Again, I would have to agree with Luke. I don't really think that I'm an exemplar of a balanced life right now. I think that I'm working on it. I think that when I'm taking into consideration what I need to do in order to reach that point, oftentimes it looks like exercise. Like, honestly, like everyone needs different things. Maybe you read a book. Like, I mean, maybe you read a book for an
That's
hour and
pretty
you're able to just break.
attacking.
But like,
Jesus.
but like I need to exercise. Like it makes me feel better. It's a night like I really like running because I don't have to think about anything. I just like it's just time that I need to kind of reconnect. I get some good ideas for essays and stuff since you brought up college applications. You know, it's much needed alone time.
So obviously, like you guys have been able to talk a lot about your balanced lives, but do you guys think that a balanced life is necessary? And if it is necessary, what is it necessary for?
I don't think it's necessary. I'd say it's optimal, because you can function with an unbalanced life for at least a while, but it's necessary for things like mental health, you know, stress,
Things like
taking-
mental health.
you know,
I know,
just
I just
minor
like that.
things like that, you know, and like taking care of stress and having enough energy throughout the day. Then if those are your top priorities, then it's necessary. But if your top priorities are success in school or your chosen activity, then it would be optimal to have a balanced life. But often, depending on what's most important in your life, you'll be willing to sacrifice for other things.
I think that a balanced life kind of implies having like boxes to check. It's like, okay, well, I have to have family time. I have to have time with friends. I have to have X, Y, or Z activity. And I think that perhaps a better way to look at it is like to have a centered life, to know exactly or exactly like what you bring to the table in any situation or with any number of activities. And so I think that it's like I think that it makes everything easier if you know where your center is and you know how to refuel personally.
Okay. And we're talking about balance. How do you guys define a balanced life? What is it? Is it a really strict definition, or is it strict? Is it loose? But what is a balanced life?
I'd say a balanced life is definitely different for everyone.
Yes.
Because some people thrive in really high stress environments, while some people really do not, and some people love to be around people all the time, while other people do not. And so a balance is for everyone. It's different, but I'd say it's the state of existence that makes you as happy and successful as feasible in your current
And
situation.
I think with like at that point, that's a really good closing point for us. So I think it's time for our commercial break. But when we come back, we'll have more things for you to discuss. So please come back and join us.
Thank you.
One of the most important resources to our state is water, and it must be protected. Jobs in water quality are in high demand, and Emily Griffith Technical College, with help from Miller Coors, knows how important it is to have qualified workers helping to protect this resource. Want to be a part of it? EGTC has the right program for you in water quality management. In less than a year, you could be certified and on your way doing your part in protecting this most important natural resource. Go to emilygriffith.edu to start your career in water quality management.
Hello. Hi. What are you waiting for? What are you afraid of? You jump right in. Shooting video. You have a camera in your hand more than a book. Learn from my dad. He won't waste your time. Learn video production. My dad will teach you. You can do this.
A lot of people think you have to be really good at numbers. And that's not really true. You do have to be good at solving problems. So we take students through all the basic fundamentals of accounting and hope to give them enough skills to go out and work in an entry-level accounting position.
All right, we're back to Mile High Discussions. We've got a new question for you guys, and that is, what do you guys think about multitasking as far as balance goes in life? Is that a way to increase balance?
I'll start with this one. I think that different people have different capacities for multitasking. I think we were talking earlier, and Luke can listen to 2 songs at once. I personally cannot do that, but I don't know. I think multitasking, if that looks like you accomplishing more and accomplishing a lot at once and always being productive is something that you value, then multitasking does contribute to balance.
I think when you're talking about multitasking, what tasks are very important, because the brain is really good at processing information from different senses, like sight and sound you can do at the same time. 2 different types of sound is much, much, much harder, as well as like writing and listening. Your brain can only process one form of language at a time, so you can't write well while you're listening, and you can't hear someone while you're writing or reading. So that's really important. But if it's something like listening to music with no words in it while you read a book, absolutely. Is it like listening to a podcast or the news while you drive? That's multitasking, absolutely. And so it really depends on what tasks you're talking about.
So I think in America, multitasking is a very high valued skill. So, and we've been talking a lot about balanced life, but how do you feel like society thinks of like what a balanced life is in America? Like, what do people think of as an example, an example of what is a balanced life?
I think there are definitely versions of people's lives that like kind of a copy and paste version of people's lives that they think of like, okay, well that's a really well-rounded life, right? And a lot of times for adults, I feel like that looks like a relationship, that looks like a successful career, it looks like having the idealistic family, it looks like having a bunch of different friends. And I think that social media really throws a curveball into this equation when you get into, like, when you start thinking about what contributes to a balanced life. It's like, you might have all of those things, but if you're constantly focusing on projecting them onto some form of social media, how balanced are you if you're also taking into account this external approval?
When you're talking about what society thinks about a balanced life, I think it's really important to say what society you're talking about. Are you talking society as in your coworkers, your family, your spouse, your neighbors? Because they're all going to have very different ideas of what your ideal balanced life should be. And so if you're talking to your neighbors, it's probably about, you know, working enough but still having time for your kids and family, and, you know, keeping the house clean, participating. While your coworkers, it's probably working and having fun outside of work with your coworker's boss, you know. And so that's an important perspective to look at balance in society from.
For like, let's say for influential people in your life, so like your friends, your family, your boss, what are the key things that you need to work on to keep it all managed and to balance it all out? And like with people that matter most to you, when it like all comes down to it, these are people you need to take care of first. So.
I think for my family, it's definitely the balance leans a little heavier on things like school, because education is really important and you need to do real well in school to get into a good college so you can get a good job. And so it leans a lot less on the you know, personal free time aspect than it does on the, you know, school and work and stuff like that.
We have a really different situation at my house, because I think that education and prioritizing education is kind of a given. Like, it's like that's expected. But that's just, it's not enforced because everyone kind of manages that on their own, my sister and myself. But we do place a really high value on doing things outside of whatever you have to do, i.e. education, family, and making sure that you are always kind of improving in one capacity. So like, for instance, my dad's an ultramarathoner, so he trains for 100-mile races independently from our family, and it's awesome because he's able to manage that and then also be a member of our family. My mom is learning French for the first time. My sister plays cello. You know, we all have different things that we're working out outside of it, and education is just kind of a given.
So like with all these different interests, should there be a hierarchy of these relationships? Should some interests be put like above another, and should some relationships be put above another?
Family.
I think that's really a person-to-person basis. If you're someone who doesn't have a close connection with your family, then obviously you're not going to put your family connection first. If you're someone who, you know, your spouse is your entire world, then obviously that relationship is going to come first. And so I think, especially in terms of, you know, balance and what comes first, that's an internal thing.
But do you think the hierarchy is necessary? Do you think that should always exist?
I think everyone should have their own hierarchy of needs and what they're going to put their time into. I just don't think it's a universal standard.
Sure.
Then how do you deal with the conflict between, let's say you place the value of your work lower than like your your friends, so you either that means you occasionally like do not put in those late hours at the office when you're older. Like how do you deal with that conflict? And since everyone is different, how do you deal with the conflicts of saying, hey, I value this more than this, but someone else is saying I value that more?
I think that there's such an emphasis right now on like constantly winning at every single thing that you're doing. It's like, and that's just not feasible. You cannot be, you can't subjugate your work to like your social life and expect to be just as successful in your work as other people that prioritize work over you. And I think that it's being real with yourself and acknowledging that there are things that will fall behind if you prioritize accordingly to what you really, really value. And I think that people just need to be okay with that. Like my dad always talks about how, you know, he works really, really hard and he provides for our family, but he knows that as a result, he can only be ever be a B+ dad because he's simply not going to be able to put, it's true. It's true. That's how time works.
Brutal.
Yeah, it's how time works though. Like it's brutal, but it's also like, at least he's honest with us.
Yeah. Can't find anything to disagree with.
So then,
Thanks.
going back to the social media, do you think all those ideas of like winning are like just like that's what accelerates is these ideas winning is social media? And if you do think that, like granted, do you think there should be like unplug time? Like
Yes, absolutely. I don't have social media, so I can't really speak to this except for I get to observe its adverse effects on people from a third-person perspective. Can you speak to this?
Do you not have social media for this
Yes,
reason?
for these exact reasons. Yes, I think it is incredibly terrible for mental health and also for productivity as well.
I think social media has a really, really, really large stigma, and to a degree, that's valid. However, I think, once again, that's a person-to-person thing. If you're someone who prioritizes your Instagram feed over all else, then obviously, when you don't have, you know, more followers or more friends than your friends and family, you're going to be upset by that. But if you're someone who just doesn't care and you use it as a way to keep in touch with people, that's a whole different monster. And I think the whole you have to win is not a result of social media. That's just our culture as a whole.
But what about, so it's like an innate feeling kind of within us, as much as we like to say that we don't do it, but we compare ourselves to others. And I feel like social media is a very, very big part of that. So, and then you say that's not winning, but if you're comparing yourself to others on social media, that can be very harmful to a person.
I would agree, and studies have in fact shown that our generation specifically has some of the highest rates of mental health issues. And it's really difficult to point to anything other than perhaps maybe bad parenting techniques, but the adverse effects of social media. And yes, humans will always compare themselves to one another, right? Like jealousy is as old as water, you know? But at the same time, when you have a vehicle like social media that really amplifies this and makes it really clear to people with, like, can you think of anything more ironic than you literally place filters on pictures? It's like, there's no better way to discuss how damaging these false projections of people's lives are than through that. Like, you are not projecting an honest version of your life, and as a result, other people are suffering, and you yourself are too when you see other people's.
One thing I think many people forget about social media is you can choose who you compare yourself to. So I can choose to only follow people that I think of as my equals, or not to follow anyone I know. Or I can choose to follow, you know, celebrities who live in multi-million-dollar homes and compare myself to them. So really, that's an aspect of, you know, self-control almost in that. Is if I'm comparing myself to someone who makes, you know, 4 times as much as I do every month, then obviously I'm going to feel pretty bad compared to that guy. But if I compare myself to my friends who are doing just as well and are happy in their lives, then you know, I'm going to be feeling like I'm doing well and happy in my life as well.
And do you believe that people have that self-control?
Well, that's their problem. You know, that's
But
not,
no,
that's
but
not
do
the
you-
problem of social media. That's an individual thing.
Okay, do you have that self-control?
I really don't follow anyone I don't want to. And if I see myself feeling bad when I look at someone's, you know, profile, I just don't do it anymore. It's that simple.
That's really impressive. That's really impressive because I don't think that a lot of people share in your remarkable willpower.
Well, you know,
because
that's a
I
personal
think,
issue, you know.
I
If
think that it's such a Pandora's box for a lot of people, and I recognize what you're saying, right? Because obviously, willpower is a controlling factor in whether or not people feel badly when they look at this stuff. But at the same time, I'm not saying get rid of social media. I think that there are a lot of good things that come along with it. But at the same time, it's difficult to view it as anything but a slightly problematic.
Awesome. Well, Henry and I thank you guys for being our guests on the show. Hope you guys can, you know, learn from what we talked about today and tune into other shows if you'd like and check us out. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
All right,
you.
and thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next week.